Welcome to the Fanmouth Fantasy Roundtable. Mouthing off at the roundtable today is myself, Aaron Lee, Mr. Fantasy himself, Mr. Dave Del Grande, and the high-stakes hustler, Jeff Collins. We're here today to give you our picks and advice so you can pick your way to a big fantasy payday this weekend. Let's dive right in. Dave, what was your strategy in building your lineup this week?
Well, I like to compile as many superstar players as I can at running back and wide receiver positions. I try to find superstars who are playing weak opponents. Ideally, that's everybody's dream matchup, but I'm looking for 4 of them each week, and then I try to build around them. You can't really fit 4 of them often into your salary cap. This week I've got 2 of them that have great matchups. I have a third superstar talent that has an average matchup, and I have a good wide receiver who's got a great matchup. So I think I've got 4 solid players at those positions, and I've structured the rest of my lineup around that.
What about you, Jeff?
My strategy is to go after a couple big elite running backs coming off of a bye week. A couple guys I've got that have a ton of carries over the course of a year, but now they've got a little bit of a break, so I'm going to roll with them and take the easy points at quarterback. It's another strategy I like this week. And then the wide receivers and tight ends, if you've been watching, you realize that I kind of tend to go after the low-price guys there because there just tends to be a ton of value there.
I did a similar thing. I picked a few big-name players that I think I had to have in my lineup, and then squeezed a few sleepers in around there in the hopes that if my sleepers don't break out, my big-name players will compensate and get enough points to make up for it. So who do you have at quarterback this week, Dave?
Well, I talked about spending a lot of my wide receivers and running backs. Obviously, the quarterback position is a victim of that. I'm going with Cam Newton, who I think has a lot of potential and a low value. He's a guy who has been disappointing so far this season, no doubt about it, and that's why his value is low. But I see good signs. He had his best rushing game 2 weeks ago. He had his best passing game last week. I think this team's offense is on the rise, and they're playing their weakest opponent they've faced all season. They're playing at Minnesota on the turf, which should be good for Newton. So at a low value, I think he offers high potential.
Yeah, that's solid. Cam Newton is a guy that's going to give you the upside that I always rag on you about, that you don't take a guy with a big enough ceiling. But Cam Newton's one of those guys. He gets the rushing yards and the passing yards and has a lot of potential for points there. And the Vikings give up 21.5 points to opposing quarterbacks, so it's a solid move there. For myself, I went with Peyton Manning, though. I can't imagine many people will argue with me there. You'll get every couple people might say that, well, it's going to be a blowout, so he's not going to play the whole game. But I think what most people realize is that he's going to get his numbers first, even if he does come out, because they're going after those records.
Peyton Manning against Jacksonville. An upset, I think.
Yeah, I do worry about the blowout factor there, but like you said, it's very hard to argue with Peyton Manning. Cam Newton, I'm a little worried about his protection. He got sacked 7 times last week, and it made me nervous watching. I think I'm not convinced quite yet that he is going to be a strong fantasy starter. My pick this week is Drew Brees, which, like Peyton Manning, is pretty hard to argue with. I think this could turn into a bit of a shootout with if Gronkowski gets back on the field and New England manages to put up some more points, he's going to have to keep slinging the ball. And there's no running game. Even the running backs in New Orleans are wide receivers.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but what scares me about the New England-New Orleans game is the defenses. Any other year you would think of this game as a game in the 30, a game in the 40s, play as many of these guys as you can. But both these teams have done very well defensively this year. And if I'm going to pay a high price on a guy like Brees, I'd much rather it be against an average defense, hopefully below average defense. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game than people think.
An argument can be made for that. I'm not going to rag on you for that, but if forced to choose, I choose it's going to be a high scoring game, and so I like that pick a lot.
Already 2 things you're not ragging on me now. I love it.
I'm sure it won't last.
Yeah.
So you spent a lot on quarterback this week. Did you spend a lot on running backs?
I'm not stopping my spending yet. Still got the wallet out, still going after big, high-priced guys, and I took 3 this week. I've got 1 as my flex, but I'm going with Adrian Peterson and Doug Martin, those guys that are coming off the bye weeks, the high-volume guys. Adrian Peterson's a very violent runner, and a nice rest will benefit him greatly. Doug Martin's got a great matchup. Another high-volume guy is the lowest amount of touches he's had this year is 22, so I think those guys are good. And then you've got Danny Woodhead thrown in there. He started off bottom of the depth chart, has worked his way up, and you're seeing him worked in there a ton. He's getting goal line carries, receptions, you name it. He's the perfect check down for Phillip Rivers, who's realizing that he doesn't need to force the ball into coverage. Just check it down, and Danny Woodhead can bail you out.
I watched this show last week. I heard you say Woodhead, and I immediately went out and put him into one of my lineups. I even thought about putting him in this week. So I love the pick. It's a great low-value guy. The one that I don't like as much is Martin. And my concern there is not Martin. It's not the matchup. It's Tampa Bay. I just don't know if Tampa Bay just might explode at this point. It's clear they don't like the coach. They got rid of their star quarterback. They're changing things. They have some volatile players. By all rights, they should hand the ball to Martin 30 times this week. And heck, by next week, everything will be fixed there. But I'm just not sure if the coach signals in a play, let's run the ball, that the team's saying, yeah, we don't like the coach, we're going to pass the ball this week. So I don't know. I just, there's something about Tampa Bay that tells me, let's wait till they turn things around before trusting.
I don't think a rookie quarterback's going to say, you know what, coach wants us to run the ball, I'm going to pass the ball instead. I think that's career suicide. But
who are your picks at running back this week, Dave?
Well, as I said, I've got two high-priced guys. One's price is not as high as it usually is, and that's why I went with him. I went with DeMarco Murray, which I think is the best matchup all week this week. Dallas playing Washington. Washington's run defense is terrible. I think Dallas is going to run the ball as much as they can this week after getting into that sling fest last week against Denver. The more questionable pick is Ray Rice. He has not had a great season. His value has come down because of that, and rightfully so. But what I like about Rice is last week, Baltimore turned things around by handing the ball to Rice 27 times in that game, and they won the game. And I think that's their secret to success. I think it's going to happen again this week. Green Bay is not an elite defense. I think that's the way Baltimore is going to have to play to win this game. So, give me a superstar running back getting the ball that many times.
Green Bay is a pretty elite defense against the run. They're 5th in yards per game and 7th in yards per carry. So it's not a very good matchup. Ray Rice has been maybe the least efficient running back in the NFL. Could definitely be argued. He has as many fumbles as he does broken tackles. And he's got 5 fumbles in the last 8 games. Harbaugh's come out this week saying that we can't fumble the ball ever. So I don't disagree that they need to run the ball more to win, but they've got Bernard Pierce, who's a very efficient running back, a guy who didn't fumble last week, a guy who had 11 carries for 46 yards, which is much better than 27 for 74. So
not in the fantasy game, it isn't.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about efficiency, though, and a coach trying to decide, well, how do I win this game? He's not concerned about, well, that guy had more yards. I mean, obviously, he looks at the carries, too. So the other thing is, too, Ray Rice used to be a big play guy. He used to be able to break tackles. He used to be able to get these big plays, but his longest plays so far this year is 14 yards. So, I mean, that's unreal. That's extremely low. And if you think that Baltimore is going to run the ball for 40 times this week and that Ray Rice is going to score all the team's touchdowns, then Ray Rice is a good play. Otherwise, he's not.
See, we agree.
Well, I agree that Ray Rice is not – I don't like that matchup. I also don't really like the Peterson matchup. I think Carolina held the Seahawks to 12 points, and they haven't had one team get more than 100 rushing yards against them this season. So I don't know that matchup excites me much more than the Rice one does. So my 2 matchups this week would be Noshawn Moreno, which we've already talked about, and Arian Foster. I think with the way Schaub's playing, they're going to keep the ball on the ground in Houston, and I think that, as we talked about before, it's going to be a blowout in the Denver game, and they're going to run the ball there too.
I like both those selections. I had Foster in my lineup originally. As I said before, I'm looking for a superstar in a great matchup, and he qualifies on both ends there. I think he's going to have a big game, especially the way Houston played last week. You know, the last thing they want is to put the ball in the quarterback's hands. They want to settle things down, give the ball to their backs, even get Tate involved. But I think they can both play, and Foster can still have a big game. And Moreno against Jacksonville, when Denver probably won't throw a pass the whole second half, I want their running back on my lineup. So
yeah,
good choices.
I have mild concerns about the depth at running back for Denver. They could end up using someone else if it was a blowout and they don't want to put too much tread on his tires. But the Foster matchup is a great one. And it's funny that Dave also had him in his lineup at one point, because so did I. So if all 3 of us want him, it tells you he's probably a good value this week.
All 3 of us agreeing. Might be the only time we see that for a while, huh?
Maybe.
Dave, who do you have a wide receiver this week?
Well, I've got 3 of them because I'm using one at the flex position. I have 2 big-name receivers in very good matchups, I think. 2 of the 6 weakest pass defenses in the league we're going up against. Brandon Marshall of the Bears being one of them, and Pierre Garçon is the other one. He's going up against Dallas. Marshall's going up against the Giants. And so 2 teams that have been very bad against the pass, 2 very good receivers. I think they're very solid selections. My third one is more of a sleeper pick. Obviously, if I'm spending all my money on running backs and wide receivers, I need low-priced guys. Keenan Allen is my flex player this week. Last week, against the Raiders, he had a big game. We've seen his number of targets improve from 6 2 weeks ago to 9 last week. It seems to be trending upward on a team that's throwing the ball at almost every down. He had a big game last week, and on top of that, he had a touchdown called back on video replay, and he was targeted in the end zone on a pass that was intercepted at the end. So he could have even had better numbers last week. So I think he's a very good low-value player.
Keenan Allen, solid. Pierre Garçon, very good. Brandon Marshall, scary at best. With Brandon Marshall, everyone's talking about the great matchup this week. It does look good at a glance. They do give up a lot of yards to receivers, but not the receivers like Brandon Marshall. The best comps for him so far this year, Dez Bryant, Demaryius Thomas, Dwayne Bowe. None of them have had a big game because of Prince Amukamara. Prince Amukamara is going to be lined up against Brandon Marshall. You've seen Alshon Jeffrey get more involved, obviously. They're not going to throw into double, triple coverage if the teams continue to cover Brandon Marshall like that. Dez Bryant went for 4 catches and 22 yards. Demaryius Thomas went for 5 catches, 52 yards. And Dwayne Bowe went for 4 catches and 58 yards and a touchdown. That was the best one. I want all 3 of those guys combined out of Marshall if I'm spending that much money on them.
I want Prince guarding Jeffrey this week. Don't you think? He's been better.
I don't know if we're there yet,
No.
but I think we could get there. For me at receiver, I had to go pretty cheap because I'm all Peyton Manning, all Adrian Peterson. I'm obviously stacked early here, so I had to take a couple chances, but I think they're good risks to take. Julian Edelman's a good one. Tavon Austin is a good one. Both prototypical slot receivers, PPR guys that have a very high floor and also have the ceiling too because of all the opportunities they're going to get. Tavon Austin runs the ball, receives the ball, returns punts. If with Edelman and Tavon Austin both returning punts, you've got potential for points there. Not extremely high, I realize that, but with Tavon Austin and his matchup, he's playing against the Texans, okay? The Texans have given up a touchdown already to a punt returner, and they have the second highest average for punt returners. So not saying, hey, look, Tavon's for sure going to return a punt, but I'm saying there's a decent chance at it. So I like that, bumps him up a little bit for me.
Trying to think of which receiver to critique because you're throwing me 2 lob balls here. I'm going to go with Edelman because I see Edelman as, you're right, he's this underneath receiver who's posted decent numbers this year basically because Amendola's been hurt and Gronkowski's been hurt. These are clearly 2 far superior receivers than him, but that are going to put up better numbers than him. They're even going to throw the ball out of the backfield to Bolden. I see Edelman being a 4th or 5th option this week, and Gronkowski coming back and stealing 10 to 15 targets out of a passing game that hasn't been that great already. So I can see Edelman having a 2-catch for 14-yard kind of game.
He could, but that's why he's priced so low. As of right now, he's 14th in points, and he's the 30th highest priced receiver. So that is already priced into his salary. So he also has performed well with Amendola in the lineup. Let's not forget week 1 where Edelman is the guy who shined in that whole offense. It was him and Vereen. That was it. Those guys just completely took over. So,
well, since you picked apart Julian Edelman, I'll just say that the Tavon Austin pick is probably my least favorite pick you've made so far today. I just can't put my money on hoping a guy's going to return a kickoff, and he certainly isn't going to be catching any balls. Houston hasn't allowed a receiver a touchdown in the last 3 weeks. So my receivers instead, Ted Ginn Jr. being one of them, which if you like Cam Newton this week, you like that pick. I think he could get a long ball in the end zone from Cam. And my other pick is Marlon Brown, which I know we got to watch the injury report. He might not make it into the game, but if he does, I think it's a great matchup for him as well.
Okay, here's the deal. We got Marshall and Garçon over here. We have Marlon Brown and Ginn and Edelman and Austin. I'll give you all 4 of them against my 2 receivers. I say my 2 receivers outscore the 4 of them. I don't like any of the 4 selections.
They're way more expensive, though.
But at least we didn't waste our money on Ray Rice.
When you add up those 4 salaries, it becomes very comparable.
Yeah, you got dead money at Ray Rice. I'll put anyone in my lineup against him. Let me defend Tavon Austin because apparently we can't move on past that. Tavon Austin is going against Bryce McCain. Bryce McCain is the weakest link of the Houston Texans defense, and he gives up a ton of targets and opportunities to these slot receivers. He doesn't defend them well. So if St. Louis is going to attack Houston, they're going to do it with the slot. They drafted Tavon Austin to use him as the centerpiece of that offense, and this is the week he's going to shine.
Well, we can revisit this next week after the game's over and we see who's right.
Deal.
Who do you have at tight end this week?
Garrett Graham. This feels kind of like cheating. Owen Daniels was ruled out, and Garrett Graham all of a sudden gets elevated up to the next level. Now he's a top 10 tight end, in my opinion, and you're getting him at a ridiculous price. It's not cheating, I guess, but it's sort of like cherry picking or something in basketball. Like it's like, well, what are you doing? That's kind of not fair, but I love him.
Yeah, I like the value. I think my concern about it is what I mentioned before. Is I think Houston's going to get back to running the ball this week in a game that they should win fairly easily. I don't think they're going to throw the ball nearly as much. That said, I can't argue. I love the price, and at that price, you're probably going to get good production.
Yeah, that pick just makes me slightly nervous because of Schaub. It was embarrassing watching him last week, and so I'll wait and see how Schaub can do, rebound from that. But who's your tight end this week, Dave?
Well, my tight end is Gronkowski. I had him 2 weeks ago in a game that he didn't play. And in some ways that makes him a better selection this week because he's more ready to go. And his price, if he had played 2 weeks ago, his price would be up there with Graham right now. And it isn't. It's far down the list. It's shockingly low for a guy with the fantasy MVP of the league last year. I think he's going to come back and have a big game right from the get-go. Tom Brady's been waiting for this moment all season long. Is the New England game against New Orleans going to be high scoring or low scoring? Well, if it's a high scoring game, as you guys seem to think, then Gronkowski is going to have a monster game.
Yeah, it's funny. I think between Dave and us all season, one of us has talked about, well, we got to get Gronk in our lineup at least. So there's no way I can argue with that. I'm going to get Gronk when I can while his value is low. But not for my early leagues. I'll wait and play him in my Sunday leagues where I know, okay, he's for sure active, so I'll sneak him in a couple lineups. But he's a solid pick. Just because he's a little banged up, I don't think he's going to have a problem getting some touchdowns and plenty of looks from Brady. So.
Yeah, you two seem to have quite the love affair with Gronkowski, but I'm just not ready to put my eggs in that basket. We haven't seen him on the field yet, and I have no idea what he's going to look like. Yes, he was great last year, but we don't know what's going to happen. So I went with 2 tight ends that I know what they're going to do. Well, I think I know what they're going to do, and that's Jimmy Graham and Martellus Bennett. Jimmy Graham, my love affair with the Saints continues. He's impossible not to put in your lineup, in my opinion, and I did it again this week. The last time an elite tight end faced off against the Patriots, it was Tony Gonzalez, 2 touchdowns, 150 yards. And Martellus Bennett is facing off against the New York Giants, who have allowed every tight end except for one this season to reach the end zone.
Well, like Peyton Manning, if you've had Jimmy Graham in your lineup this year, you probably have a real good record, maybe even undefeated. And I'm sure you've won a lot of money in these daily leagues. So I can't argue with that selection. It's Bennett that, you could have picked any running back, any wide receiver. It's the flex position. I had him in my lineup as tight end last week. He did all right, but I'd want more value than that out of my flex position. Plus, he got banged up a little bit last week, so I'm definitely off him this week.
Yeah, again, look out for Alshon Jeffrey. Martellus Bennett, his stock should be getting lower and lower and lower while Alshon rises. But with Jimmy Graham, he's the guy, along with Peyton Manning. I think there's 2 guys that I kind of always start my lineup with, and I'll tinker from there. So I'll put Peyton, I'll put Graham, I'll see what I can do, and a lot of times I'll have to move one out, but he's a guy you want in your lineup every week if there's a way.
I feel like after Peyton and Graham are in my lineup, I have about $12 left, so
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to work.
That's been enough.
I guess that's what we're here for, right? Coming up with the solution. Who's your pick at defense this week, Dave?
Well, my pick on defense is Houston. They're going up against the Rams. I just like the way they match up. But Houston hasn't been great defensively this year. That's because they can't stop the run. We saw this last week against the 49ers. 49ers went into the game knowing Houston is bad against the run. They ran the ball all game long. I'm sure in St. Louis right now they're saying, man, I wish I had that kind of running game, because we don't. We can't run the ball on Houston. We're forced to go up against the third best pass defense in the league with a very mediocre passing game. So I think it's a game Houston's going to win easily. You're going to see like I said, a below average Rams passing game, have to throw the ball a lot. That's going to get sacks. That's going to get turnovers. I think Houston can have a big defensive game.
Yeah, it's not the worst you can do, but the Rams give up the 20th most fantasy points to defenses, and the Texans rank 24th in fantasy points. So for the same price, you can get the Broncos defense going against Chad Henne and the Jags in this matchup that the Broncos are favored by a ton of points. And you know that the Jags are going to have to take some chances. So what does that equal when you've got a poor offense, a poor quarterback? It's going to equal turnovers. So the Broncos, at the same exact price as the Houston Texans, are a great value. I like them.
Yeah, and I don't have a huge problem with either of those matchups. I do think that if the Jaguars do put up any points this week, it will be in the air. And I think they could put up a few touchdowns. But my pick this week would be the Bears, and it's pretty simple. The Giants love to give the ball up. Eli Manning loves to throw interceptions, and the Bears love to take the ball away. The numbers don't lie. I think it's the perfect matchup.
And the Giants are hurting at running back now, so they'll probably have to throw the ball even more. I think it's a very solid pick.
Absolutely. That was defense I looked at myself. You're talking about Eli Manning, a guy who turns the ball over more than anyone, going against a tough Bears defense, a defense that, while it does struggle against the pass sometimes, it loves to create turnovers, so that's points.
Sounds like we agree. Once again, twice in one show.
What do you know?
Something's in the air. Well, that's all the time we have for today. That's the Fanmouth Fantasy Roundtable. I am, as always, Aaron Lee, Dave Del Grande, Jeff Collins. We're here giving you our advice, so take it or leave it, but we'll be here all season long. And if this wasn't enough, check us out on the blog at blog.fanmouth.com, or jump into the conversation with us and ask us the tough questions that we didn't answer here today on Twitter at PlayFanmouth. Fanmouth.com. Play loud, play daily.